In this video, we're going to be exploring the hidden secrets and connections in Cyberpunk 2077 of all 10 gig quests which take place in Kabuki. This is part 1 of what will be 3 videos covering Watson, with Northside and Little China soon to follow. So get comfy as we go through in the order they're unlocked, all the hidden secrets and subtle connections of every Kabuki gig. Huge thanks to my patrons as always for supporting these videos, and now let's get to it. Monster Hunt is one of the first gigs you can complete in the game, and serves as a great example of being thrown in the deep end. Bear in mind, it's notably beneficial to complete this one before you head to Clouds during Automatic Love, and I'll explain why later on. The gig itself then involves breaking into the Ho-Oh Club to find and kill Jotaro Shobo, a psycho who likes to scroll XBDs, where he killed Joy Toys, among multiple other things. He's also a guy that crops up in numerous encounters throughout the rest of the game, which we'll be looking at somewhat. Too bad for him that lately he's been messing with the mocks, and now they've employed V to break into his club and take him down, or incapacitate and send him to them so they can do it themselves. It's really kinda tough for an early game gig though, and the 3-story club is heavily guarded on each floor. So if you're wanting to do this as efficiently as possible, then I'd recommend heading through this gate to the right and up the adjacent stairwell, and with 7 tech you can get through this door and jump across to the club's top floor. Again though, since this is an early game mission, I'd imagine most of you won't have tech to that level yet. Well, there's better loot anyway if you move through the entire club, it's just more of a stealth challenge. So whether through stealth or power, make your way to the top and take out Shobo. Be sure to grab the best loot from this locker here as well, then make your way out of the club either via the stairs or more creatively off of this balcony. Looking around the top floor first though, we can begin to understand just what kind of screwed up XBDs Jotaro was scrolling here. And as we're about to further learn, he really was one of the most despicable and annoyingly powerful criminals in the whole of Night City. Check out his terminal for a further glimpse into the details of his work. Now, in following YouTube's guidelines, I won't explain in too much detail, but hopefully this will give you a good gist. With order lists which sound worse than 50 Shades of Grey, as well as lists of ideas which go into an uncomfortably disgusting amount of screwed up detail, it all goes to paint a really excellent picture not just of Jotaro alone, but of the type of activities in Night City which there's not only a market for, but an uncomfortably successful one. There's also a convo on Jotaro's body mentioning him getting rid of other bodies at La Catrina, a Valentino-run funeral home at Vista del Rey, which according to the database is totally legit and not used as cover for a smuggling enterprise defo. Looks like Jotaro's gang ties extend beyond simply the Tiger Claws. So that's the gig done, but Jotaro's influence is far from wiped clean just yet. You can encounter shards of various conversations with him throughout different scanner hustles, which continue to drill home this man's evil influence. One I found very early was south of the Kabuki market and involves a girl named Kiko trying to escape Jotaro's influence, only to be tracked down and brutally murdered publicly as a display of fear. Then we've got the case of Evan Flakes, an ex-Tiger who ratted to the NCPD, notably to Anna Hamill, whom we'll meet in another gig soon, and then the NCPD themselves told the Tiger Claws on him, and Jotaro went after him and his entire family to again make a spectacle. That corruption that Jotaro precipitates in the NCPD can then be seen further by coming down to the border and finding this vehicle. Next to it we have a dead border patrol guard, and we can read that he and a friend have an agreement where they pass certain individuals crossing the border over to Jotaro to film his screwed up brain dances. Luckily, it seems the last thing this guy did was attempt to take advantage of a nomad girl who was evidently more than a match for him. Then finally, possibly the worst case of these bonus encounters can be found again in Kabuki, wherein a guy named Peter has literally trafficked a group of people in a shipping container to sell to Jotaro. Tragically, we can read the tale of Tracy Owens, who, unlike the others, didn't make it. She contacted her mum, explaining she'd been kidnapped, who in turn made the fatal mistake on her daughter's part of believing that calling the police was enough. You know, those same police who already have a bunch of deals lined up with Jotaro himself. Maybe if Anna Owens had gone to a fixer rather than stupidly placing blind faith in a corrupt authority who pretends to be defenders of the people, then Tracy might still be alive. Anywho, back to the Monster Hunt gig itself. Now that Jotaro's gone, you'll have unlocked a unique piece of new dialogue when you interrogate Woodman at Clouds. Let's have a listen, shall we?
Guessing you heard about Jotaro Shobo?
Shobo had an accident.
What Shobo had was a very unfortunate meeting with me. Just happened to be his last. Wouldn't want this to be your last meeting, would ya?
Of course not. Never wanted to be anything like Shobo.
So there you go. If you want to go the interrogation route with Woodman and don't have a high intelligence skill, taking out Jotaro Shobo is a decent option, which after conducting our more thorough investigation here, makes perfect sense. I mean, Jotaro is practically a Gotham villain, which we took out very early in our career. So on merit of just how much Jotaro's shadow reverberates across the rest of the game world, then this is easily an S tier gig. If anything, it's a shame there aren't more gigs like this, which have just as many scanner hustles that we can find later on. With such a huge gig to kick things off, this next one is way smaller by comparison. Troublesome Neighbours can be found in North Kabuki, just up from where Regina is based, and the idea behind this one is that Regina doesn't want Tiger Claws starting to take liberties on her doorstep. So, we've been tasked with eliminating their leader, Taki Kenmuchi. There's literally 4 Tiger Claws here though, including her, and everything about this mission feels a little easy. Still, at an earlier level, I'd recommend taking the high ground on these guys. But rather than trying to declare
It's over, Anakin! I have the high ground!
just stealthily shoot or short-circuit them, and we can find out more after. It turns out that Taki's plan was a fairly simple one: to buy up some discounted pachinko machines, which I understand to be a Japanese cross between slot machines and pinball, then simply earn big. Say what you will, even if the machines are rigged, it's better than shooting up other people out on the street, and I'm starting to feel a little bad about killing Taki now. I don't think she posed any threat to Regina whatsoever, but then again, maybe others would have in time. If we read her private terminal, we can also learn that she tried to acquire help from her uncle, Hiro Kenmuchi, who suggests she go to her father. She then explains that she and her father, though, are not on speaking terms. Damn, we've offed a girl who just wanted to set up a pinball business and has estranged father issues. But I guess that's part of the morally grey nature that can come with being a merc sometimes. Just a shame though, because a simple strong warning might have sufficed here. Well, luckily it turns out there is an option to incapacitate and deliver her to Regina, in which case perhaps a simple strong warning is all Taki will get, or she'll be pushed out the window, such is the way of things. Overall though, this one's very basic and could just as well be a scanner hustle. I'm gonna call it a D tier gig. Mikhail Akulov is a Russian fixer who crops up multiple times in the game. We can first encounter him during the heist at Konpeki Plaza, where he'll walk past alongside Nadezhda Tiarina. We'll run into the two again properly later in a way bigger gig, but first up we'll get an earlier gig entitled Welcome to America, Comrade, which involves the simple task of planting a tracker on Mikhail's car. At least it would be simple if we weren't also supposed to do it utterly stealthily. Makes sense, of course, we don't want anyone to know about the tracker, but still, stealth ain't exactly the most forgiving mechanic. As usual, just be particularly mindful of security cameras, either shooting or shutting them down before they give you away. I found coming around the right hand side here was the least heavily guarded, and whilst it may not appear at first, there is an option if you're looking at just the right place to plant the bug on the back of the car, which believe me is way simpler than the front, which is sprawling with guards. Just be careful not to get spotted by the sniper up top. After that, hop out over the fence and you're done. But just to be thorough, let's scour the compound to see if we can find out a little bit more. Now obviously the car in question is a freaking Erendite, the single most expensive thing in the game, and so the dock workers have all been told explicitly to watch it better than anything else around the place, as well as making sure to never touch or risk any scratches on the thing. The most heavily armored security guard is literally placed looking directly at the Erendite all day long, and a terminal message from one Michael Zabudka explains how he'll be torn apart piece by piece if anything should happen to this car. I mean, Mikhail looks like a reasonably calm guy from the outset, but I really don't doubt for some reason that that is something he'd be capable of. So if you want to make that happen, then we can just blow up the car. Don't actually do that though, because you'll fail the mission and things won't get pretty and Regina will be annoyed. Now, if you do complete the stealth objective, you won't be paid extra, but you will receive an extra gift from Regina. For me, it was a Lexington. Pretty pointless since I already have a better one, but I guess the challenge of completing the optional objective is the main prize here. Anyway, we'll come back to Mikhail with another gig at the end, but this one though, by itself, is going to be a B- for me. Now, whilst intense action gigs are fun, they do tend to have nothing on the action of the main questline. Personally, I prefer the gigs with a good story behind them, a nice array of dialogue options, and multiple different outcomes. Woman of La Mancha is a gig with quite a few of those, but sadly, you'll learn by the end that the only fully positive one can be unlocked exclusively for Nomad characters. So, Anna Hamill is the classic case of a clean cop working in a corrupt organization. Her latest investigation is into a crime conspiracy taking place in Kabuki Market, it, and ties in with all the stuff we were talking about with Jotaro Shobo just a minute ago. She wants to stow the corruption and is also investigating the likes of Fingers, a fact which, in my book, makes it even more pertinent that we don't kill her, because indeed, we've been hired to put a stop to her investigation by any means necessary. First though, we gotta find her, and the person with the information we need is none other than the Ripperdoc Dr. Chrome at the back of the market. There's also this nomad as well who'll talk to us, but he's only prepared to fully help fellow nomads. Turns out Anna is in room 303 of Kabuki Market's hotel. We can either access her quickly by leaping from the adjacent building, or we can rent room 203 for access from within. There's also a terminal inside the hotel explaining exactly where she is too. Now, when we reach Anna, she'll immediately come at us all confrontational, and we'll have to pick our dialogue very carefully in order to not enter combat with her. If you're not a nomad, then the most peaceful outcome is to simply keep picking the less threatening options before telling her that the NCPD themselves ordered the hit on her. She'll profess to want to leave Night City in this moment so as not to get killed by her own organization, and will get congratulated on a job well done. Tragedy is that Anna then goes on a revenge spree, and we can actually find the body of her fellow cop, Bill Adams, buried under a pile of bin bags a few days later. On him, we can read an archived convo and learn that he wasn't the first she killed either. Anna has entered a solo war against the NCPD, but is killed in a firefight a few days later. Guess we really couldn't talk her down after all. Back to the gig then, we can just kill her on the spot, that's an option, and I guess we save the lives of some corrupt officers since she's going to be dead soon anyway, though I'd kind of rather give her the chance, even if she won't take it. Luckily, there is one happy ending option, if you're a nomad. In this instance, you can get a dialogue option convincing Anna to join the nomads before sending her to the Aldecaldos. The idea of a family who'll actually watch her back is exactly what Anna's after, and exactly what she hasn't had working for the NCPD. In this case, she'll fully drop her vendetta, and you could even meet her at the camp later on. Just another reason that Nomad's the best life path, that's all I'm saying. For the varying moral conundrums and subtle outcomes then, gonna make this one an A tier gig. Backs Against the Wall, though, is a gig where literally no matter what you do, there is no definitively happy outcome. So basically, Regina has hired us to recover a pack of stolen meds from a guy on behalf of a Ripperdoc. The whole thing immediately highlights the wider issues of unaffordable healthcare, coupled with the growing issue of cyberpsychosis. So we head inside the apartment building to recover the meds, and immediately we get a conversation between two residents. They're complaining about hearing animalistic screams in the middle of the night, and whilst they want to deal with the issue, they're completely lacking in a worthwhile way to do so. Sounds like our guy has been having some issues. Getting to his apartment, you can either pass the 7 tech check or jump across via the fire escape. And once we're inside, we can see the guy's been living in utter squalor. Sadly, not out of the ordinary in Night City. The ceiling's caved in between 2 floors, and we can find not 1, but 2 copies of How to Build a Bomb in Your Kitchen. Coincidence? I think not. We might just have to stop this guy before he does something terrible. And if we jump across this broken bit of floor here, we can actually spy him through the wall. Now, bear in mind, he is a powerful boss tier enemy, so if you want to avoid diplomacy and fight him with some cover, this could be your best bet. Be warned though, he can still shoot through walls. But seriously, come on, we gotta talk to the guy, at least a bit, and there's a number of different paths the convo can take, which all lead to the same 2 outcomes. I'd recommend doing this one after the heist, as Johnny has plenty to add here. The guy's name is William Hare, and he explains that the meds he stole don't even work. He's tired of the system leaving people like him in the dirt, and he's gonna murder Deputy Mayor Weldon Holt in order to make a statement. Now the bomb stuff makes sense. There are 2 ways to talk the guy down here. First, those with 7 strength or more can appeal to William's role as an ex-soldier, learn a bit more about the hardships these guys have endured, and ultimately win him over with the point that he'll do more harm to others in his condition than good. After all, people won't be sympathetic anymore if he does this. They'll just hunt down all the cyberpsychos, and not non-lethally like we did. Alternatively, those without strength will have to reason with him via the fact that killing 1 politician won't change anything. If you pick this dialogue option, then you're home free. He'll tell you to leave with the broken meds, we'll get a bit of dialogue with Johnny, who pities William, and we can also scan his computer to learn he was attending therapy sessions, but stopped quite a while ago. Sadly though, pointing out the futility of the guy's assassination idea removes the final thing Hare was living for, and as we head out of the apartment, a shot rings out, and then silence. This is one of those gigs that really show you how broken the world of Cyberpunk is, and worse still, it reflects the real world all too clearly. Vets with PTSD are all too often discarded by their country and left to mentally deteriorate. And we've also got to question, why did the Ripperdoc want a batch of meds back that don't even work? Unless of course they still think they can profit from selling said meds on to victims whose backs are figuratively against the wall and are desperate enough to try and buy anything. This gig hits way harder than most, and in my book is a solid S tier. Now, over in northern Kabuki, just down from the overpass, is a detached garage building which doubles as a med clinic run by a man named Roger Wang. One of Roger's friends recently suggested he ask for the sage business advice of the loan shark, Blake Croyle. Now, loan sharks are obviously very slippery slopes, but despite the fact Roger never borrowed any money, simply took a moment to ask for advice, Blake has used the tiny expense of his time as an excuse to leverage everything that Roger owns. Threatening Roger's pregnant daughter ensured utter compliance from him, and the NCPD as usual refused to do anything about it because, you know, it's a real crime and all that. So Roger contacted Regina, who contacted us, to infiltrate and neutralize the threat. It's a relatively straightforward gig with several Animals members to take out and a couple ways inside the building. Some of the garage doors also open here, so be sure to access them too for extra loot. Then, all in all, you can either flatline Blake there and then, or non-lethally take him out and load him into a fixer car for others to deal out due justice. It's something Blake definitely deserves, because if we take a look at his personal computer, we can see that his plan is literally to drain Roger of all of his finances, destroying the man's life for the quickest, most effortless profits. There's also a convo of him and Tim Autry, who we also fight here, and it describes dealing with someone's wife/husband/kid, whatever that means, in order to threaten people. Yeah, I feel no guilt at all in taking these guys out. Now, we can also find that at least one of them was in close cahoots with Sasquatch, and mentions the fact that Roger's clinic has lidocaine, which the Animals want. Lidocaine is a skin-numbing anesthetic used by Maelstrom in initiation ceremonies and by the Animals in cocktails. In fact, it's also the central focus of Pacifica's one gig, which I'll be covering in another, likely very short, video. Now, once this gig is closed, Roger will return, and the place will turn back into a med clinic that we can shop at. We can buy top-tier med crafting specs here, and if you select the option to ask for a discount when we first speak to him, you'll get 10% off. Though bear in mind, Roger really won't be happy about that, though his reasoning is that he already paid us, which is kind of fair enough, I suppose. Though on the whole, CDPR didn't quite stop with Blake Croyle as a character just here. Down in Coastview, up from Batty's hotel on a ledge facing out to the sea, we can find an empty stage and 3 violently murdered band members. Like, seriously violently murdered. The drummer's got a drumstick in his neck. They were killed by none other than, you guessed it, Blake Croyle and his goons. The one here, Bart von Orkman, has an archived convo all about it, where at the end he insults Blake, refusing to pay him, and, well, the aftermath speaks for itself. He's also holding an item of legendary clothing, which is super rare, so you'll definitely want to pay this encounter a visit. The gig itself then paints Blake as a brilliantly evil character, though mechanically, in terms of actually completing it, it's kinda basic. B- from me. Small Man, Big Evil is another gig which heavily ties back to Monster Hunt with Jotaro Shobo from earlier. In this instance, we've been sent to take out one of the guys who supplies him with the poor, kidnapped souls picked up from the streets of Night City. Jae-Hyun is a member of the Scavs who handpicks vulnerable individuals from the streets who likely won't be missed and traffics them off for human profit, exploiting a broken society to utterly evil ends. Now, I don't know if this is intentional or not, but this guy's appearance, well, let's just say I feel like he'd be the type to ask me what colour my Caliburn is, if you catch my drift. Come up to the building rooftops and take out his scav henchmen however you see fit, as well as the man himself, to be dealt out due justice. Very, very straightforward in terms of gameplay, but as usual, not lacking in a handful of more subtle storytelling if we look around. Now, this rooftop area is pretty crowded when it comes to hidden encounters, so you might experience a bit of overlap here. For example, I was also attacked by this drone from across the way, which it turns out was actually actually reprogrammed for a man named Oleg Orlov, whose body can be found through a gate over here. The shard on his body mentions the job was done by Hal Kantos, whom, funnily enough, we'll meet very soon in the Northside Gigs video. I don't know if the drone is supposed to attack us during this gig, but again, it's a cool little obscure tie-in. Back to Jae-hyun though, we can learn further how evil this man really is by reading 3 entries on his data terminal. First up, we've literally got a list of young, vulnerable people he's taken off the street, disgustingly referring to them as up for grabs. Then in messages, we've got an actual communication with Jotaro himself. Jae-hyun is describing to him the people he has up for sale through an absolutely twisted, extended culinary metaphor. In fact, we can find the same email on Jotaro's computer back during Monster Hunt. The second message here then describes the issue of one of their kidnapped people having a seizure and no longer being fit for Jotaro's purpose. Clearly, Jae-hyun is somewhat afraid of Jotaro since he chooses to switch the person out for someone else who's meant for a corpo, and thus running the risk of pissing that corpo guy off instead. It just goes to show how well Jotaro has ruled through fear throughout this time, and shines even more of a light on why exactly Woodman is so cooperative after learning that we took the guy out. In fact, I'm starting to wish that Monster Hunt had been one of the final gigs in Kabuki, wherein we finally could have taken out a guy we've been hearing about for ages down on the streets. Oh well, I guess it kinda does something different, which I do respect. But as for this gig, it's a cool Jotaro tie-in, and I like the rooftop setting, but at face value, it is an extremely basic layout, so for that, I'm gonna award it C tier. Aloista Queen is a corpo who cheated Regina, then tried to make his way out of Night City with a datapad containing info that Regina wants. So, the gig last login involves us tracking down said datapad from, well, its last login location. But, in the process, we wind up busting open a slightly wider conspiracy. You see, Alois's ultimate fate was to be kidnapped by scavs and brutally taken apart to harvest his cybernetic implants. The scavs operation is actually running directly under the Ripperdoc clinic of Charles Bucks, who's resorting to these more than immoral methods to further supplement his business more cheaply. Confronting him afterwards, we can straight up believe he had nothing to do with it, like an utter gonk, or pick one of the other 2 options to be offered a 20% discount. Refusing this will cause him to run, and killing him will permanently disable him as a Ripperdoc, obviously. But personally, I'd recommend you take the discount. There's not too much top tier cyberware here, but the few legendaries he does have are pretty spenny, making 20% a pretty massive wad of saved cash. Then again, you are contributing to the perpetuation of the scavs people harvesting business, which in fairness is one of the most face value evil practices in the game. There's also a Badlands gig for another video where an Aldecaldo boy is killed by other scavs who also supplement Charles's business. So if you want to forego the bonus on account of morality, much as that has no actual consequences on the game, I really don't blame you. This also happens to be the location we'll pick up Sandra Dorset's shard for the full disclosure side quest, so remember to do that too to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. That thing's a way bigger can of worms though, which speaks to a much wider conspiracy, so that's gonna have to be a future video all of its own. I also found a legendary Fazal shotgun, which is awesome because I didn't know they existed at this tier in the game. But bear in mind that loot might be RNG and you yourself could get something different from this gig. On the terminal by Alois's body, we can read a message from Charles threatening 2 guys to return the flunitrazepam that they stole, or Rohypnol as it's more widely known, and he's definitely taking on a much more threatening persona in this email than he does with us. One persona is certainly a front, but based on how he cowardly flees from us, I'm willing to bet the email is the false persona. Finally, on the Files tab, we can find one of Charles's clients is none other than Tiny Mike, whom we're off to rescue in our next gig. First though, I'm going to give this one a B+. The gig alludes to the shady practices of certain Ripperdocs, whilst also having the balls to offer us the option to profit from something inherently immoral. Concrete Cage Trap is a gig which really does have quite a lot going on. Added in 1.6, we're tasked with rescuing a fellow Merc called Mike Kowalski. Come on, that's definitely intentional for some reason. Anyway, he's known as Tiny Mike as well, so we're gonna call him that. And he's been cornered by Militech into one of the blocks in Kabuki after he stole some of their sensitive files. It's a classic extraction job, but being one of the final unlockable gigs in Watson means it's gonna be quite a bit tougher than most. In fact, you may recognize this area from earlier in the video because it is indeed the exact same location where we took out Taki Kenmuchi for the Troublesome Neighbours gig. However, removing the tiger claws has simply made it all the easier for Militech to swoop in and lock the place down. Heading in through the front then, either sneaking past or fighting off the Militech men, first building you may come through is Cab's tools. Hacking this computer, we can first read a threatening email from a customer complaining at not receiving their delivery despite not having paid for it. And then the second one is from Militech themselves, explaining they're taking control of the area and all residents must vacate the premises. Active and passive non-compliance with this will not be tolerated and may result in summary execution. The email then signs off with the quote, "Militech, we look out for you." Of course they do. I'm sure they're really looking out deeply for all 785 people on this block. On one of the Militech soldiers, we can actually find their termination warrant for Tiny Mike, which highlights the fact that they know pretty much nothing about him, not even his name. Therefore, if we can escape, he's home free. Come into the building at the back where Mike is laying injured next to the bathtub, and we'll give him a hand in a minute, but first, let's find out more by reading his computer terminal. First email here is from Big Pete, Mike's older brother, whom will actually be sent to take out during a gig for Dakota. Completing this mission beforehand will indeed unlock new options for that one, which I'll cover in more detail in the upcoming Badlands gig video, and we can also learn here that Tiny Mike was in a relationship with Christine. That's the junk vendor who we meet with River during I Fought the Law, and who also employed the cyber psycho that attempted to kill Mayor Ryan. Small world, huh? The second email is from Regina, and seems to explain specifically how Mike got into this mess. The contract to collect the Militech data was originally issued by someone called Max, and I'm willing to bet that that's Max Jones, whom we either rescue or don't during a Northside gig. Makes sense, as he's been on a warpath exposing crimes against soldiers lately. Third email relates to Mike's gun, the Hypercritical, a modified Kalak precision rifle, which in just a moment will become ours to keep if we so wish. I've covered precision rifles, in fact I've covered every weapon in detail in another series of videos. Now let's give Mike his inhaler and get the hell out of here. Take Mike up on his offer to go through the restaurant, and he'll open a previously locked door for us and provide a much quicker exit. Hop into the fixer's car, and on this rare occasion we actually join Tiny Mike on part of the ride. This is turning into way more of a friendship than the average person we rescue during a gig, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if Tiny Mike comes up more in some future content. Either way, for today, we've earned an iconic gun, 12,000 eddies, and apparently a new friend. Head to the Afterlife bar later in fact, and we can actually sit down with Mike not too far from the bar for a bit of a drink and a chat. I wonder how friendly he's going to be though after we kill his brother later. Well, again, that's going to have to wait until the Badlands video. For now, he's a chum, and this is an A tier gig. As far as last gigs go, this one makes for an excellent last gig. The job's kinda tough, stakes are high, and it takes place in a location more awesome than most. So, Fixer, Merc, Soldier, Spy once again revolves around the Russian fixer Mikhail Akolov from the car tracker gig earlier in the video. Only this time, we're gonna get a lot more close and personal as we go and actually collect his data shard from right under his nose. Now remember, this isn't the first time you'll see Mikhail or his companion Nadezhda, as prior to being moved to this luxurious penthouse, they were staying in Konpeki Plaza, before, you know, Emperor Saburo got murdered and all that. Now, this penthouse in Kabuki is going to be tough to access, but not impossible. We could of course obliterate the downstairs security and get direct access straight to the penthouse, but that would immediately fail the stealth objective, and also not exactly be fun, so let's try a little more tact. Speaking to the receptionist, we've got a couple options. We can rent a room below Mikhail, giving us access to break into his place, but that's going to set us back a whole 4,500 eddies, most of the gig's salary. Also, the room in question is incredibly scuzzy. Feels like something from a motel, and the utterly gorgeous view is ruined by this sort of prison mesh stuff. Those with enough intelligence then can distract the guy and swipe the keycard from the desk for free, or just walk into this back office via a tech check to swipe another one away from prying eyes. Without a doubt though, the most interesting and fun method is street kids only, who can claim to have a delivery for Mikhail. V can either be delivering him some specific substances or delivering themselves for the night, allegedly. And this guy totally buys it, almost. Stall him from informing Mikhail and then pay a far more agreeable 1,100 eddies to be granted access to the same lower floor, from which you can easily access Mikhail a whole number of ways. Tech check through the door, climb the balcony, or even hop up via this lift thingy and through these shutters. Once inside, we've still got to be careful, since the bag where the data shard is will often be inaccessible with without passing Mikhail or Nadezhda's line of sight. The golden opportunity I used was to drop down from upstairs when Mikhail went outside. At that stage, getting out should be fairly simple, but I decided to non-lethally take the two down, which doesn't fail the stealth bonus by the way, and find out more info. Nadezhda's shard implies she's suffering with early onset cyberpsychosis, having so much cyberware that it's causing her trouble sleeping, and in classic Soviet fashion, it's basically shrugged off as an oversensitivity from Western healthcare experts. Now, obviously, we could outright kill her right now, but it might be cool if not doing so could otherwise in future trigger an extra cyberpsycho encounter, one which the attentive among us could actually see start at this point earlier in the game. Just a thought. As for Mikhail, he really can just be left alone out on the roof, but if taken out, we can get a little more character development on how he keeps cutting comms with his Soviet contacts and going off alone into the city. Now, when we enter the apartment, it's actually possible to catch a conversation between the two where Mikhail seems to suggest that he's grown a liking to Night City and kind of might want to stay there. Again, classic example of a Soviet experiencing Western culture and realizing that they prefer it. Too bad we don't find out whether Mikhail does decide to stay if we keep him alive. Mind you, after losing his data shard to the Chinese, whom we deliver it to after leaving the hotel, I'm pretty sure he will be in some deep shit. Mind you, it turns out that if we dig deeper, Mikhail was already spying on the Chinese in much the same way. You see, on another terminal, in the upstairs office of his penthouse, we can find an email from someone named Shelma, apparently a runner who set up VPN encryption for Mikhail across the hotel network. Turns out this Shelma can also be found in-game. You see, Comrade Red is a reported crime just to the north of the trailer park, where we can first find one Valentin Krylov dead on top of this trailer. Seems as though they fiddled with the generator and either got electrocuted or shot by the turrets. Reading the shard, we can find out why. This was all part of a job issued by Mikhail, which went horribly wrong. And searching the basement, we can find the body of Shelma overheated in her Netrunner chair. A second shard explains that she'd been tasked to spy on the Chinese by Mikhail with the objective of finding, quote, a reason for us to fight them, end quote. The initial shard then tells us that the Chinese caught Shelma in their system and blocked her inside. Then, in attempting to cool her body down to jack her out, same as we do with Bugbear back in that other gig, Valentin evidently screws up so unsuccessfully that he got himself killed too. So all this to say that the Chinese knew that Mikhail was spying on them, or likely they knew that the Soviets were at any rate, and this gig then is seemingly the natural response of the Chinese wanting to spy back. The whole thing, when looked at as a full picture, is just a brief glimpse at the international subterfuge that constantly goes on beneath Night City's surface, a game in which we have the most minor of parts to play. There's also another tiny detail on Shelma's shard from Mikhail, explaining that after the job's done, she'll be invited to his place for one of, quote, those parties, end quote. And after reading that, I think I understand just why Street Kid V was believed when claiming to be there to satisfy him for the night. Overall, excellently structured gig with a whole string of wider connections, as well as hints to way bigger arcs which could be explored in future games. It's not as intriguing as, say, the Dream On Perales Mr. Blue Eyes conspiracy, but it's certainly one of the more intriguing stories from simple gig quests. And for that reason, I award Kabuki's final gig a solid S tier. But let me know down in the comments below your favourite of these 10 gigs and why, and also tell me of any more references you found to the likes of Jotaro Shobo, Mikhail Akolov, or anyone else from these gigs. In the next video, I'll be going over the 10 gigs found up in Northside, then finishing up with a smaller one on the 3 in Little China. If you want more videos like this sooner, then let me know, as I plan to cover everywhere in time. Massive thanks again to my Patreon supporters who make longer videos like this possible for me to do more often. You guys are absolutely awesome. I'm Sam Bram, and I'll see you very soon up in Northside for the next entry of this series. For now though, I hope you have a great day.